Okay, so you've probably heard that phrase, work smarter, not harder.
Mm-hmm.
Today, we're really trying to do that for you, sort of cutting through the noise and the sources to get right to the important stuff. And the idea we're doing a deep dive on, it promises to help you work smarter, the 80/20 rule.
That's right, yeah. Also known pretty widely, actually, as the Pareto principle. And the core idea, when you boil down what the sources say, it's deceptively simple, but really, really powerful.
Right.
Basically, something like 80% of your results, the outcomes you want, tend to come from just, 20% of what you put in, your efforts.
And it has a pretty fascinating backstory, too. One source mentioned it goes back to the late 1800s. An Italian economist, Vilfredo Pareto.
Yeah, Pareto. He noticed that in Italy, about 80% of the land was owned by only 20% of the people. A really specific observation back then.
Wow.
But what's amazing, and the sources really highlight this, is how that specific pattern just popped up kind of everywhere, way beyond economics.
Like where?
Well, productivity, obviously, time management, business strategy, even things like software development, quality control.
Mm.
It's surprisingly common.
Okay, so let's unpack this then. Let's figure out how it works based on the sources, and I guess most importantly, how you listening can actually use it to be, more effective.
Absolutely. Think of the principle as like a lens. It helps you see where your efforts really count. You start recognizing that not all work creates equal value.
Right. Not all hours are the same.
Exactly. So
Oh,
you can consciously focus on that vital few, that 20% that drives most of the impact. It shifts your focus immediately to the high leverage stuff.
can you give us a concrete example, something from the sources?
Okay, yeah. One example they cited was a typical sales team. They looked at their numbers, and sure enough, 80% of their total sales revenue, it came from just 20% of their clients.
Oh, only 20%.
Or maybe it was 20% of the product features they pushed. The point is, that insight let the team totally refocus their energy. They could, double down on those key clients or market the features that really mattered.
And get better results without just working more hours.
Precisely. Working smarter, like you said.
That makes sense. But, okay, if you accept the principle, the really big challenge seems to be figuring out what your 20% actually is. How do the sources say we should pinpoint those crucial tasks?
Yeah, that's the key question. They basically outline a systematic approach. You got to start with tracking and analyzing, like list out everything you actually spend time on for a week or two.
Okay.
Then you categorize those things and evaluate them based on, well, how much they actually contribute to your goals. Which tasks really move the needle? Which ones give you tangible results?
So looking past just being busy and actually using data or some kind of metrics.
Exactly. The sources really stress using metrics if you can. In business, maybe track revenue per client, like the example, personally. Track which activities genuinely push your main projects forward. Tools can help too, even simple spreadsheets or productivity apps. They help you see the patterns.
I know the Eisenhower matrix came up in some of the reading, that urgent versus important idea. How does that connect with the 80/20 rule?
Oh, great question. Yeah, the Eisenhower matrix is a perfect fit, actually. It's a practical tool for applying 80/20.
How so?
Well, it makes you sort tasks, right?
Yeah.
Urgent and important, do it now. Important, but not urgent, schedule it. Urgent but not important, delegate or ditch it. Not urgent and not important, definitely ditch it.
Yeah. Okay.
The link to 80/20 is really focusing hard on the important stuff, especially that important and not urgent box. Things like strategic planning, learning new skills, building relationships. Those are often your vital 20% for long-term results.
But they're the things that easily get pushed aside by urgent, less important things.
Precisely. If you're always just reacting, you neglect the core 20%.
So that strategic focus sounds absolutely vital for managing time well.
It really is. Once you identify that 20%, you can build your schedule around it.
Mm-hmm.
Time blocking is one technique they mentioned, literally blocking out time on your calendar for those key tasks.
Especially when you have the most energy.
Right. Protect that peak time. It simplifies decisions, what you should be doing, and stops your best time getting watered down by low-impact stuff.
It sounds logical, but I imagine there are roadblocks. What kind of traps do the sources warn about? What stops people focusing on their vital few?
Yeah, definitely traps. Two big ones really stand out in the material: multitasking and perfectionism.
Ah, multitasking. We all think we're good at it.
We do. But the sources cite research showing it just fragments your attention. Constantly switching tasks can slash your efficiency by up to 40%. It actively works against the 80/20 focus.
Wow, 40%, that's huge. So the opposite, really digging into one thing.
Exactly. Single tasking. Focusing on one high-impact task at a time lets you concentrate properly and really leverage that 20% effort.
Okay, and perfectionism, that probably hits close to home for a lot of listeners.
Oh, absolutely. It's a massive productivity drain. Trying to make every single task flawless, even the unimportant ones, you just sink way too much time into things that don't deserve it.
So what's the advice there?
Basically, define done or good enough based on the task's actual value. Save that deep perfectionist drive for the stuff that's genuinely in your vital 20%.
Luckily, technology can help us with some of this, right?
Oh, definitely. The sources point out how tech can really enable the 80-20 approach. Things like project management software help teams visually prioritize, keeping that critical 20% front and center.
And getting rid of the repetitive stuff.
Precisely. Automation tools.
Yeah.
They can handle the tedious, low-value tasks that's often the 80% of input giving minimal output, and that frees up your mental energy for the strategic work, the important stuff.
We talked about the sales example earlier, but the sources had other real-world cases too, didn't they?
They did, yeah. Beyond sales, one mentioned a large nonprofit finding 80% of donations came from 20% of donors. That totally reshaped how they engage with people.
Makes sense.
Another was software development fixing the top 20% of reported bugs, often clears up 80% of the crashes users experience.
Even something like healthcare.
Yeah, identifying that a small slice of chronic conditions drives most healthcare costs. Let systems focus prevention and management resources where they'll have the biggest impact. Better outcomes, more efficiency. It just shows how universal this idea can be.
It really sounds like this isn't just about like picking a new technique. It's more of a fundamental mindset shift.
It absolutely is,
Yeah.
fundamentally. It requires you to consciously focus on value, not just volume or hours worked. Deliberately choosing to work on the few things that generate the biggest results.
Which also means, and this is probably hard, learning to say no sometimes.
Crucially, yes. That's one of the toughest but most vital steps. Saying no to requests, commitments, even your own impulses if they fall outside that critical 20%.
It's not about being unhelpful, though.
Not at all. The sources frame it as protecting your capacity to do the work that truly matters, the work that delivers the most value.
And building habits around it, I suppose, regularly checking in.
Right, like regularly analyzing your time, reviewing priorities, maybe using simple systems like task lists or that Eisenhower matrix, and just reflecting what actually moved the needle this week.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, the real power of the 80-20 rule, drawing from your sources, seems to be identifying and then really relentlessly focusing on that vital 20% of effort that brings most of the results.
Yeah, it starts with analyzing your inputs and outputs, maybe using tools like the Eisenhower matrix to guide your priorities, and actively fighting those common traps like multitasking and perfectionism.
And using technology smartly to support that focus.
And just seeing how it plays out in the real world, sales, nonprofits, software, healthcare, you name it.
And like we said, at its core, it demands that mental shift, including, crucially, the discipline to say no to things that just don't make the cut.
It's less a productivity hack, more a framework for working and living more intentionally.
So here's a final thought for you, the listener, to maybe chew on. If it's really true that 80% of your most valuable results spring from just 20% of your effort, what does that suggest about how you're currently spending the other 80% of your time? And maybe more excitingly, what new levels of impact or even freedom could you potentially unlock if you shifted the bulk of your focus, your best energy, onto that critical, high-leverage 20%?
That's a powerful question to sit with.
Indeed it is. Well, that's all for this deep dive. We hope this helps you think about identifying your vital 20% and maybe finding a more impactful path forward.